again, welcome. My name is Rita Levy. Welcome to the Bethlehem Area Public Library. And I'm going to introduce our leaders today, the ones that are going to be leading the discussion. And we have Elizabeth Dolan right here. And I think she's going to sit back like she normally does, but eventually she will chime in, trust me. So Elizabeth Dolan is an associate professor in the English and Health, Medicine, and Society program at Lehigh University. She's published extensively on Romantic era women writers, including Mary Shelley. And we have Claire Silva. She is a second-year master's student at Lehigh University in the English department. She loves the theme of education, accountability, and the ethics of caretaking in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. She is overjoyed to be participating in the Frankenstein, and she's excited for tonight's discussion. I think just like everyone is excited because of last week and what we discussed last week. We have Tricia Nordon is a graduate student at Lehigh University. Her work focuses on community literacy, so she's very happy to be here tonight to hear your thoughts on Volume 2 of Frankenstein. So again, welcome to the Bethlehem Area Public Library, and let's get going.
Do you guys mind if I make a couple of announcements?
Not at
So
all.
just some upcoming events for everyone to know about. This Friday, which is the 26th, I believe, at 7 p.m., we're hosting a screening of Young Frankenstein on Lehigh's campus in Sinclair Auditorium, which none of us can locate on a map, but we can get there. But perhaps Google and so on can help you get there. So that starts at 7. That's also, everything's free and open to the public that we're doing. And then on Saturday, the library is co-sponsoring the film Kenneth Branagh's version of Frankenstein, which is called Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. And that's at 1 o'clock on Saturday, the 27th.
Yes.
And then on Monday, we have our third book talk, third and final. Same time, same place. And then on Wednesday, on Halloween, again, we have the Frankenreads day-long marathon reading of the novel out loud. We have filled in all the slots for readers, but inevitably someone will forget. And if you're there, we will hand you a piece of paper if you're interested, and you can get up and read for 10 minutes.
Right.
Okay, so it's a community reading. We had a great response.
Yes, it's all filled up, and you can have my spot. I just took a spot, but if you're eager to read, be my guest. And I know your face.
Yes.
Yes, NCC, yes. How are you? Welcome.
So anyway, we'd love to have y'all at any of that, and the Frankenreads is a costume optional event. Children are welcome. You're reading the novel. It's not scary or inappropriate. It's mildly scary, I guess, but it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
There's some murders, but they're off screen. So kids are welcome. There's actually a costume contest, right, with the prizes, or
right. We'll be giving away books. We just for the best costume or maybe best reader or something like that.
Okay. TBD.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Or maybe every 10th reader will get a book or something to that aspect. Yeah. So we'll be giving away little goodies.
And there'll be food. I have a group of undergraduates who are organizing food, and they're super into it, so it'll be good. Anyway, go ahead.
And may I just say something else? For those who are coming in early, we're going to open the door at 9:30.
Okay.
Okay?
Great.
Yeah, I think we'll get started. We'll take it away.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. We're really excited to see you here. This is such a good turnout.
Yeah. So we thought we'd start the night with just a little bit of an overall summary of Volume 2, just so we know kind of what's going on, and maybe even a little bit of a refresher in Volume 1, just to get everyone back up to speed on that. So for Volume 2, we are, this is after William is found dead, or Victor finds out that William has died, and Justine has been put to death for the murder. So we have the family leaves. They're all very, very distraught. So they leave for Belle Reef, and then while Victor is there, he's very upset. He suspects that the creature is responsible for William's death. So he wants to avenge William's death and Justine too. So they are sort of like on vacation, southeastern France, the foot of Mont. And then while they're there, Victor sort of goes off into the mountains. He's contemplating, and that's where he comes face to face with the creature. So then Claire's gonna take it.
So yeah, Victor comes face to face with the creature on this precipice. Icy, it's snowy. We can maybe talk a little bit about how the environment plays into this volume if you guys are interested. And the creature sort of has an ultimatum: listen to my tale and grant me my one request. So Victor gives in and listens to the creature's tale. So when the creature first wakes up, he's sort of overwhelmed by all of his senses. He's feeling, smelling, seeing, touching for the first time. And he's kind of like a baby, right? And then so he leaves the lab where he was created and goes out into nature where he learns how to feed himself and clothe himself. He also discovers fire. He encounters men and women who are all sort of screaming in fear at the sight of him, and he becomes sort of utterly isolated. And he starts living in this hidden hovel for himself where he begins to observe the DeLacy family in their cabin, and he begins to feel sort of a kinship with them, which consists of a blind father, his son, and daughter. And he secretly helps them with their chores and begins to empathize with their poverty. And when Safi, a young Turkish woman, and the DeLacy son's fiance arrives, he also begins to learn from them. So he eavesdrops on Safi's lessons and eventually learns to read, which leads him to reading both Victor's journal, which he stole upon leaving the house, and Paradise Lost by Milton, where he learns that when God created Adam, God nourished and taught Adam, was a friend to him, right, a creator, a protector, whereas the creature sees a vastly sort of different reality for himself. Victor abandoned him in disgust. So the creature begins to grow angry at the injustice of his own creation, and he is rejected on sight sort of by the DeLacy family, who he had really grown to love and care for. He burns down their cottage and heads to Geneva to seek revenge on Victor Frankenstein when he kills William and frames Justine, and then follows the Frankensteins on their journey, where we again meet him and Victor at the precipice, the icy precipice. So.
Okay. Thanks, Claire. That's great. So that's kind of like an overall view of Volume 2, and then we also kind of wanted to talk about a little bit about the theme for tonight. So it's as Rhea had mentioned, oh there she is. We're talking about fear and social responsibility and the creature as a minority, refugee, or orphan. So I was struck this weekend at doing just a little bit of research about like the refugee situation right now, because that's like something that we've been hearing a lot about. I mean, at least I have been hearing a lot about in the news. So I was on the United Nations Human Rights Council, and they have some statistics, and the one that really stood out to me was like 65 million people, and this is like from 2017, so the number has grown since then. 65 million people have been displaced from their home, primarily from Syria, South Sudan, Somalia, and Myanmar. So it's a staggering figure. Someone likened it to the entire, basically all of the United Kingdom almost, if they were to vacate their home. It's such a staggering number. So I think there are a lot of resonances between the creature and someone who has become a refugee. So hopefully that's something that we can talk about tonight and hear your all comments. So do we want to move into general questions first?
Do we want to just
Sure. Yeah.
So last week, Beth gave us a really compelling, I think, biography of Mary Shelley. I think we're wondering if anyone would like to give us some finer points, tell us what they already know about Mary Shelley, and then we can sort of fill in if we need to when you're done. So would anybody like to offer?
She's a fascinating figure.
She is.
Yeah, so it's certainly not a quiz. I think
We're just curious.
Letting you guys direct what. So, what do you guys know about Mary Shelley? What do you already know? I mean, so several people, maybe 4 or 5 people were here last week, but not everybody. So,
She dreamt about this, right? Is that how she came up with this?
Yeah,
That's
she
what
did.
I remember reading knowing her a little bit.
yeah, she did. She describes it in this edition. It's actually on page 350 and 351, which I just weirdly opened to. It's here. There it is. In the 1831 edition, she writes an introduction. She describes the scene of falling asleep, and she was struggling to come up with a ghost story in response to Lord Byron's challenge to the group gathered in the house in Geneva that summer. And she has a dream, and her dream is of a creator, a scientist leaning over the creature. And that's kind of the origin story.
I don't know a little bit of background though. How did she? Was she was a writer? I don't know.
Yeah, well, she was, okay, so she was, she grew up in a very literary family and academic family, I guess, although they weren't, like academics now with a university job, but they were just intellectuals and writing to support themselves. Her father was William Godwin, who was a well-known philosopher of the time period, a radical, political radical, and her mother, Mary Wollstonecraft, who you may know as she's thought of as one of the first feminist writers. She's technically probably not the first, but we think about her that way. So her mother died 10 days after Mary Shelley was born, because she was Mary Godwin at the time. And so she was raised by her father, and she was raised, her father remarried another woman who Mary didn't get on with. There's a lot one could say there. Godwin kept a portrait of Mary Wollstonecraft in his study even after he married, a very large portrait. It's in the National Portrait Gallery now, so he still kind of thought very highly of her, taught his daughter to think very highly of her mother, and also raised Mary Shelley's half-sister, Mary Wollstonecraft's first daughter, as well as stepchildren that his second wife brought into the marriage. Anyway, Mary Shelley was unhappy. She went to Scotland for a while. She came home. She's back home with her father. Percy Shelley is a poet and radical who admires Godwin, so he comes over and starts hanging around the house, falls in love with Mary, and the story is they court on Mary Wollstonecraft's grave. Whether that's true or not, we don't know, but there are some pretty compelling accounts that they probably did that at least partly to get away from the house and spend time alone together. They ran away together when she was 16. The problem is he was married, already had children, and so they were, when they came back from their elopement to the continent, ostracized by society, meaning intellectual society, et cetera. So, so then they went back to the continent, so we're getting to the writing. They go back on a second trip to the continent with Byron, with Mary Godwin Still's stepsister, Claire Clairant. And it's a dark summer. There's a volcano that's erupted, I believe in Indonesia. And so it's a dark sky, it's really rainy, they can't go out and do boating, which is what they like to do. And so they were gathered in Byron's villa and staying over the night, and Byron says, let's all write a ghost story. And they've been reading out loud to each other, like Coleridge's poems and German ghost tales, and just getting each other all worked up, And she's having trouble writing, but this is the first thing she would have written that she made public. She has juvenilia, but this is the first thing. And so she felt a lot of pressure.
But, correct me if I'm wrong, but her story is really the only one that survived. Like, they all tried to write stories?
Yeah, well, hers is the biggest one.
Okay.
So Byron did write the beginning of A Vampire Story, and Polidori ends up publishing an expanded version, and then Byron published another version of it. So there are vampires there too.
So based on that, do you think, the fact that her mom died when could it be that being an orphan, being left alone, abandoned, that type of thing, whereas, here is this monster, he's giving birth, and then his creator ran away. So
Yeah,
there
it
is
could be.
that connection, as far as maybe starting our discussion.
We can definitely start there. We don't have to answer that directly. We can also talk about just general feedback, if you like it or not. Anything, I will say, I won't tell you right now what my surprising thing was about this, but I found a lot of surprising things in this, especially this volume. So if there's anything surprising that you, or like just that stuck out to you.
Did anything
Interesting.
flip the script from volume
Yeah.
one?
Yeah.
Wherever.
This is how we started out last week, so don't feel bad.
That's okay.
We started out exactly like this, and then we didn't want to stop.
Yeah.
I don't know that this flips the script from last time, but like, I think it's so interesting in this book following who's chasing who with Victor and the monster, because we started with Victor chasing the monster across the ice, and then Victor running away from the monster, and the monster basically running in his own direction, but then chasing Victor, and then Victor kind of half chasing him, and so, and there's always ice. There's always ice running after each other. And so it's so interesting who wants to be near who and who's repulsed by who throughout the book, because I don't know, like the monster's not chasing him because he wants to be around him. He wants something from him. Otherwise, he'd just go read his notes somewhere.
Yeah, there is so much tension.
Yeah.
Right. Like, but it's a constant chase, and I guess I never noticed that before, or didn't think about it as much, like, who's going, who's coming, who's hiding in the bushes, like, who has an idea that they're being chased, and just this constant stalking.
Oh yeah,
That
that's
goes on
for
for
sure.
sure,
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Anyone else have anything?
I was just struck with the need for home. And, Frankenstein's home growing up was idyllic. And it was idyllic. And he was loved and had really wanted for nothing. And here is his creature who has that same yearning, that natural yearning for home. And he finds this cottage and he sees what home can be, and he yearns for that. He loves that. He feels like, oh yeah, that's it. That's what I want. And then he's abruptly rejected. And I think that idea of, the refugee that you brought up, so many people who had a sense of home and then lost it. And the creature never had that. Never had a place where he said, where he felt like you belong and this unconditional, I love you. And he keeps seeking Frankenstein. He keeps seeking Victor in order to somehow get that.
Right.
I think home is sort of complicated, right? Because on one hand, it's these people who love and care about you and accept your presence sort of unequivocally. But then Trisha and I were talking a bit about how the creature sort of has no country in a sense as well, and a lot of Frankenstein sort of centers on this idea of, I'm from Geneva, or the de Lacys are from France, and the creature is, created by a Swiss man in Germany. What is his home? Like, where can he locate home? And I think, yeah, that's really compelling.
No, I like that cross-cultural kind of thing too. It's not even a country.
Yeah.
And where does he fit in? He's really, really the minority because there are no others.
Yeah.
And that's what,
One.
right, exactly, and that's what he's seeking, and so he's totally a recluse, he's totally by himself, that of not belonging anywhere, no matter how hard he tried to. He's hoping that because of who he is as that that personality, rather than looking upon his face, he's hoping that people will view him as an individual rather than what he actually looked like, and maybe then he would feel part of a whole and part of a community, but he's told me he's not a part of anything. And so it's like, again, when Frankenstein is a metaphor for us all, whereas, that sense of passing judgment on people that, you know, you see them, they come into this country, and then, you know, you start stigmatizing them, and even though you haven't even gotten to know the person. And Frankenstein, the monster is trying really hard. He's trying really hard to express the way, you know, don't look at me at what I physically look like. Look at, you know, who I am.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can move from your comment, Ray, to thinking about like more specifically the theme that we're thinking about. And one of the questions that I was wondering, and I might be skipping ahead, sorry, Claire. What is your responsibility to someone who is different from us, someone who we perceive as a refugee or as a member of a minority group? Like, what are our responsibilities, and how do we see that? And I think there's a lot of commentary. Frankenstein's very concerned with justice. So, like, what are some of the themes that you all picked up on about like social responsibility towards others? The theme of justice.
How could people in Frankenstein have better done right by the creature? Maybe.
There's always this I feel like there's always this really snap decisions that people make when they decide to reject him, and I think that that's just, I mean, very obviously just taking more time to consider where you're coming from, you know, in regards to your perception of someone else, because no one does that. I mean, no one says, why am I rejecting this person? It's just immediate, you know.
It's a better reflection.
Yeah.
We didn't have some people reject you because they don't think they fit in their home.
Yeah.
So they kind of like follow their, sort of accepting who they are, if they want to stay in they accepting themselves in their area they're in. So they reject that person if they don't fit in. And I think that's where possibly Frankenstein felt. I remember he was emotional at one point. And I think his fear turned to anger, right? And then to violence.
Yeah.
And that's what happens to any of us, really, when you think about that. So the hate comes in. We don't want to hate, but that's exactly where the hate comes in.
Well, Victor has no, you know,
Yeah.
I'm really struck by that. When the creature's going on, he's pouring his heart out to them. This is what I did, this is what I found, this is what I felt, this is what I yeah. I mean, there's no empathic response.
And it's so funny because the creature, when he talks about watching the DeLacy family and like reading, is all empathy all the time. Like he's so desperate for connection. He's watching them be like, wow, chopping wood's so hard. I'll do that for you. and I'll learn German right alongside everybody. Because he's just so desperate. Like he's like all empathy, and the rejection just burns him so much. Like that suddenly he's completely cut off. So like where Victor has nothing and can't open up, the monster has too much, and then and then he has to start shutting things down.
I think that's really fascinating. What you were saying earlier about fear, like that being a possible reason to reject someone coming into your community, and what you're saying too about the creature being so willing to help. He just wants to help. So, how much of a threat does he pose, really?
What's the threat or the perceived threat even based on? Like,
You know, when I hear you guys say that, the first thing that popped into my mind were Mexicans. And the fact that they're always, you know, it's like you can pay them little or no money, but they will take whatever job they can get, and it doesn't matter, you know, and yet, we shun them and we say that, they come in and they're taking our jobs and so forth. And so it's like I'm seeing that, as I'm listening to you guys, I'm actually thinking that was the first thought that came through to my mind, and the whole thing of community, and sometimes I feel as if another thing that happens to us is that we feed in on what people tell us as opposed to expanding our minds. and doing the research ourselves. So it's like, for example, you know, we look at the news, we look at the same news constantly. And so the media is telling us, you know, X, Y, and Z about a certain group of people. And so we feed into that as opposed to, you know, something like, let me investigate this on my own. And so therefore we are forming judgments on individuals, not based on what we have actually gone out and done the research, but based on what somebody else. So we're regurgitating the information that is being fed to us. And I think that's usually an issue too.
I wonder if we could look at that and think about the moment in Frankenstein when the creature is interacting with the blind father of the DeLacy family, and the different dynamics between his interactions with him and his interactions with the people that are actually seeing him.
Right, yeah.
Think about those interactions and those contrasts a little bit. Was anyone struck by that?
If you want to actually look at it, are you thinking about page 124? Is that what you're thinking when he meets the father?
Yeah.
I think that's on page 124. You don't have to do this. If you're curious and you want to look at it, I think that's.
Is there a chapter that's in?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. We don't know
I think it was
Chapter 3.
Chapter 3
Yeah.
of volume 2.
Of volume 2, it's about like probably 10 paragraphs.
Okay, so that's chapter.
Oh, I know where it is anyway.
Okay.
We're all fainting and things anyway. Let's work back from there.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. 147. Geez, look at me. That's wrong. 147. Sorry. No, I said they're wrong.
If it's 147, then it's in chapter 7 of volume 2.
Chapter 7.
Sorry.
That's chapter 15.
Well, is it alright if I just read that?
Yeah.
Let's see if I can find that.
And what does the paragraph start with?
So, it's a quotation, says, "Do not despair." So this is, the father of the DeLacy family, and this is when the creature comes in, and he takes his chance, he's like, now's my chance, he's alone, I'm gonna try and talk to him, I'm gonna appeal to his better nature and see if I can join his family, make some friends. So he's presented his case, but he's explaining that he's afraid to open himself up to people. And so the father says, do not despair. To be friendless is indeed to be unfortunate. But the hearts of men, when unprejudiced by any obvious self-interest, are full of brotherly love and charity. So I was really struck by that line because I think that's true. I think it's true that people are just kind of by nature want to help other people. I believe that to be true. I don't know if everyone believes that, but maybe we can talk about our responsibility. Is it up to us to be charitable to other people? Is that something we're supposed to do, or is it?
I think so. That's why we're here. Then just be here to collect all the wonderful things that the world does. I think you're here for a purpose. I don't think everybody knows their purpose. And if you do know the purposes, I think that's great. You know, a lot of people don't believe that. When giving, I think when you give, you get back some way, sometime. Whether it's on this planet or another planet, you'll get it back. I don't know that a lot of people, I realize that, I don't know a lot of other people realize that. But I think that also comes with age too, you know, as you grow, when you've been in the book a little bit and see things around you that happens. So I don't know if young people get that yet. That's the unfortunate thing. But they live in their own little world, and we evolved in there.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting, it's the father who says this, he's, the older person in the home. Yeah.
But you see, the whole thing is that you notice that he has no sight, so he's judging him not based on what he's seeing, but what he's hearing.
Exactly. Yeah, and you see that word unprejudiced.
Right.
Yeah.
So if we can all close our eyes from time to time and stop being so judgmental and just listen to what is being poured out.
I'm sort of curious what all of you think the self-interest is that prevents people from being kind to the creature. Obviously, Father DeLacy is saying, when unprejudiced by any obvious self-interest, people are full of brotherly love and charity. What do you think some of the self-interested forces are in this book that are keeping them from being kind to the creature?
I mean, I would say there's fear of the unknown,
Right.
right? Because whenever you don't know something, there's potential danger. But the monster himself is horrified by his own image in a pool. So, here's something that no one has ever seen.
Right.
And if you think of like an animal that you see in the woods that you're not familiar with, that's larger than you.
Right.
Your immediate, it is sort of a human impulse to be fearful. And so I think the self-interest is preservation, self-preservation.
Yeah.
And I think Mary Shelley's like, as much as we empathize with the monster, I think she's a little bit clear, and I keep kind of going back and forth about this, that the physical presence of the monster is a barrier. Yeah.
I think it is its size more than even the ugliness. I mean, when you see that something that's that much larger than you are.
Well, the father feels it too, because he becomes repulsed
Right.
when the monster touches
Yep.
him and he says,
Yep.
"What are you?" Which must mean his hand is,
Yes.
I mean, he's 8 feet tall, so who knows what his hands are. But I think also there's this issue of when he's talking to Mr. DeLacy, he says, "My friend's somewhere else." And he's starts talking in theory about how people should be kind. And the second he says, "Should I know the residence of these friends?" And he goes, "Well, it's here, it's you." Oh, heck breaks loose in the house. I mean, aside from the fact that the monster touches him and he's like, "What is touching me?" There's this huge thing, and he says, "No, I'm turning to you." And that's such an interesting thing too, because DeLacy talks a lot about hope and love and sharing things when the problem seems somewhere down the road.
I think that's a fascinating point. Maybe it's easy to talk about charity when it's not right in your backyard.
When he's like, "My friend nearby
Yeah.
is who I want to turn to."
And yeah, we know that Felix was incredibly charitable to save his father. So we know that it's not just a function of age. Because Felix is a young man too, and he puts himself out on the line for this Turkish man and gets burned.
Yeah.
And so
So in some ways, past experience also informs whether or not we're charitable.
I keep thinking about this with kids, because young children aren't prejudiced. They learn it. And I kept thinking, if the creature was with a young child, if the child never fears something big or the way he looked, I think it would have been okay. I think the child would have accepted the monster.
And that adds such a dimension. Was anyone at the screening of the 1931 Frankenstein?
Yeah.
Some people were. The child in that movie isn't really scared of him. She teaches him how to play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking of William though, and I don't know, maybe William is old enough to have learned some prejudice, because there's that moment where the creature comes across him in the forest, and William's like, "Oh, you're an ogre, you're gonna eat me." And I was wondering, do we teach prejudice to children? He just said that they learn it through our stories, not even necessarily stories about other people, but just about monsters in general.
How much are we already predisposed to be prejudiced to the creature here because we hear him as Frankenstein's monster? That sort of precedes the book itself, I think, sometimes for some of us, that there's a monster in the book. Yeah.
I'm really struck by this because the creature first describes himself and he's thinking of when DeLacy's questioning his nationality, he's like, "No, I'm not French, but I learned French." Are the Germans? He's like, "No, they're not Germans." And he's like, "I'm a deserted creature." And then they go through this whole exchange about hope and how can I be of service to you, and he says Mr. DeLacy says, "I am poor and in exile, but it will afford me true pleasure to be in any way serviceable to a human creature." So this idea of what is already monstrous and make it too much of what we talked about last discussion about the nature of the human and how much we value the human, but there's a way in which DeLacy's speech is already being afforded this idea of if it's human, that's great. If it's not, maybe that's why we need to fear it. Kind of by this idea of preservation, what we don't know.
Were any of you surprised by the fact that the creature talks? I'm just gonna say, the first time I read this was this summer, and I had seen bits and pieces of the 1930 movie, and just like, and that's all I knew of Frankenstein. And then I read this, and I was like, what?
You know something that is funny, because, you know, with last week's discussion, and we were talking about, I think both of us were having this back and forth conversation about, you know, so, you know, what is human, and when do we realize that somebody's human? But then I started to think about the whole thing of how the monster was actually created with cadavers and bits and so now they're actually organic living. Even though they're dead, there is some tissue of life. And so again, this is sci-fi, you know. It's not actually a machine that was created. It was an individual that was created. An individual that was created by parts of. So there is a possibility, yes, then how did he get, you know, how is it possible that he can speak and communicate and so forth? So, you know, again, when you know, maybe I look at too many sci-fi movies, but, you know, the whole thing of all the parts coming together to create this being, even though, so there are some elements of tissues and parts of us and parts of animals and this and that created him. So he became an individual that was looking monstrous, but wasn't really monstrous. It sounds like an oxymoron, but it's either or. He looks like a monster, but he wasn't. Because of how he spoke, how he communicated, how he yearned for love, how he yearned for community, how he yearned to be a part of a whole, but was shunned. So.
Yeah. A question I have is what would make it possible for the DeLacy family to accept him? We've talked about some of the obstacles like fear, self-preservation. I think resources is maybe another obstacle. Like there's only so much to go around. There's a poor family, like maybe that would be an obstacle to welcoming him. But what would allow for them to accept him? What would have to happen? Is it possible?
I found myself thinking when I read that part, like, I thought he should have written a letter first, introducing himself and explaining that he looked a certain way, because they immediately were repulsed by him because of his appearance. But maybe if they got to know what to expect. But then I also thought to myself, that how would he know how to have any social skills, because he hasn't been brought up by anybody, and he hasn't been socialized in any way. So how would he have thought that would have been a better way to do it?
That's like so compelling, because he speaks so beautifully.
Yeah.
Like he really probably could have done that work in a letter, but yeah, did he know that was an available option? Yeah.
Right.
Well, he certainly has done everything within his power to try to educate himself.
Right.
To try to learn how the culture works, to learn the language, to learn how to think. And I think therefore I am. You must accept me now, right? And no.
Yeah.
This is visceral. Visceral. Self-preservation. Something deep from some primitive animal brain. It's just instinctive.
Yeah.
Here.
Yeah. Like you were saying, probably like the snap. Yeah, the judgment.
I think the fact that he read too much and he educated himself too much, he expected too much from humanity.
Well, we also read about wars and all kinds of horrible things, and I mean, one of the points that I was thinking about, one of the things, I guess it was, I don't know if it was Plutarch's Life, but he makes a comment about his own status, that someone had made a comment about refugees. And just that, you know, the importance of a name and of wealth, I think he mentions, and he realizes he has none.
Yeah.
And that, you know, when we think of refugees and a lack of home, but also a lack of just anything that humans tend to value.
Yeah.
Right?
Dignity.
Yeah, dignity, and I'm sorry to like move us back to
No,
different,
no.
a different point, but
But even on top of that, he starts to identify with Adam too. Like after he moves on from I have no name, no status, then and now I'm Adam, and I've been cast out, and there's no one with me too. Like, because then he gets super into Paradise Lost.
Yeah.
He doesn't say who he identifies with, so I'll be on board with that. Yeah.
And did anyone catch, that's a really interesting point, he, first he's like, I wish I was Adam, and then he moves on to really feeling like the one that was cast out, which is Satan, right? And so he's sort of identifying himself with Satan at that point, which is pretty loaded, right?
Yeah.
Did you guys think that Paradise Lost was a bit too dismal? I mean, it was the first couple of lines when I started to read. I haven't read the whole thing, but that was the first thing that popped into my mind. And when I thought of Shelley and her writing, and the fact that she read that, and then the monster and everything, I just felt that, it's so dismal, so dark. And so, the whole, the story is dark. It's just dark.
The story of Paradise Lost.
No, the Paradise Lost
Oh.
and Frankenstein.
Yes.
Everything about it when you look at society, and at least there is some when you think of society, you can at least think of there's some light somewhere. There is light, but with this, it was so dark, and there wasn't any light at any point. And maybe that's how refugees feel, and people that are displaced. There is no light, there is no hope.
Yeah. And I'm sort of curious how all of you feel about Victor after having read Volume 1 and Volume 2. What's sort of your, or just even being familiar with the story, what's sort of your arc of feelings about him and his actions? Did you feel a certain way about him at the beginning that's now changed? Yeah, how about it?
And even just to add to that, like, what are his responsibilities? What's his responsibility to the creature?
Do we want to do a refresher of Volume 1?
Well, it was just funny when you asked, like, what are Victor's responsibilities to the creature? Like, part of me while I was reading was like, what are Victor's responsibilities to anyone?
Yeah.
Because he can't write home, he can't visit, like, he can't tell the truth. Like, I don't know who Victor feels responsible to, except for Victor. And so could he be responsible to the monster? Like, at the most basic level, like the thing he put together, right? He can't even step up for. Like that's the one thing he runs fully away from, right? That's how I feel about it.
I was thinking earlier, because of something that someone over here said about empathy and the way that the creature has a lot of empathy, whereas Victor, who had this like beautiful, wonderful childhood, was like incapable of empathy. And then I'm like wondering, like, is that because he's never had to relate to anybody before? Is that because he had everything handed to him? I mean, what are we supposed to interpret that as? But then on the other hand, when the monster has some horrible things happen to him, he loses his empathy. So in that case, if empathy doesn't come from struggle, then where does empathy come from? I don't know. I feel like cycled there.
Do we like Victor? Does anybody like Victor?
It's not a matter of like or dislike. I don't think it's a matter of like or dislike. I think it's a matter of, how do we get it in his head that, he has to take responsibility regardless of whatever is before him. It's like, for example, if we have a child with Down syndrome or someone that doesn't have Down syndrome, do we discard the one because we don't like the way this child looks, and we favor the other? And so he's just maybe it's his life and how he grew up. That's the reason why he doesn't feel a sense of responsibility. His parents didn't give him any, this is what you're supposed to do. You know, that type of thing. You know, you have rules in the house. There's certain things that you're supposed to do, and then you teach them. A child doesn't, like you said, a child doesn't just come up to hate people. It's what you have created a child to become. So you teach that child responsibility, and apparently he didn't get that in his household, and that's what he projected onto to the monster. So.
Well, you're saying kind of like says something about how their upbringings between the creature and Victor are so radically different, right? Victor's sort of had his life laid out for him. He has to marry Elizabeth. That was his mother's sort of deathbed wish, and everything's been set in stone for him for a very long time, whereas the creature is sort of given this free reign. And so I wonder if part of it is finding the balance between expectation and freedom and navigating that in the right way.
And again, you have to teach the person, you know, how do you expect them to navigate those situations if they're not given guidelines?
Right.
If they're not given a template. We all need templates. We all need a figure in front of us to guide us and teach us. And even though we might, you know, not go the path that we are taught, eventually, sometimes we do end up on that path again. So if we're not given guidelines, that's what happens. We all need guidelines. We all need structure. And I think that's what we spoke about that last week too, about the whole structure. And I said something about the governor. There's a word I'm actually looking for. Pertaining to the, we all need someone to tell us what to do. And if we don't have someone to tell us what to do, then we're lost.
It's a
Right.
It's a quintessential story of a failed parent and failed parenting. And really, when you think about it, people have kids for lots of reasons, and they're not always the best motives. So he perhaps, you know, there are other people in the world who make similar errors and with corresponding results.
Yeah. I'm thinking about Victor's motives for creating the creature.
I was just gonna ask that.
Yeah, go ahead.
What was his? Why would he create something and then walk away from it? Is
Yeah.
that your feeling on that?
No, I think it's a great question. Does anyone?
whole question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's like the question.
That's the question.
Yeah, do you think because when he created it, he realized it was something he thought something to, like, sort of thinking about, wasn't up to his expectation? This creature came into life, something he didn't like. That's why
He does discuss a bit that, when he's creating it, he picks the most beautiful parts and the most, long black-haired, what have you, and when the creature wakes up, it's not what Victor had imagined. He has
Right.
these yellow eyes, black lips, and he's ugly.
Right.
I feel like it's the moment he looks in the creature's eyes, and the creature's eyes open, and that's when Victor freaks out. And he's been working on him, and so he's seen what's there. I think you can read it a lot of ways, but it has always occurred to me that maybe he realized this is an autonomous being, and he hadn't planned on that somehow. He thought about, having a creature to worship him. He has this language around what he's expecting. Have a race of creatures to worship him. But this guy is going to make his own decisions. He sees that right away, I think, and then he just can't deal with it.
I can't help but think about science. I mean, we've had a lot of judgment of Victor, which I think is at some level appropriate, but there's also an element I think that's really important in the novel about this yearning to know. And Victor seems so carried away by this desire to discover, and he talks about this hurricane of industry or something while he's like creating the monster. So, like, yes, he doesn't seem like he's responsible. He doesn't write home. He's only responsible to himself. And sometimes I think, like, I don't know, scientists are a little bit like that. Like, they're so passionate to learn or to discover, and that's what we get in Walton too. You know, to kind of the exclusion of other things. That I kind of, you know, and then I always think about Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook with Frankenstein, because, you know, Facebook is a monster. You know, and is this guy gonna be able to control this monster? Is it an autonomous thing? Is he gonna kind of like say, oh, sorry, you know, like,
And walk away.
and walk away? How is this individual going to take responsibility for the technological work that he did? You know? But yeah, I am like a little bit miffed when Frankenstein just like leaves. I'm like, don't you know that the monster would just disappear? I mean, like, it is a little bit like,
Yeah.
Yeah, he like comes back and he's gone, and Victor's like, oh, thank God.
Don't have to think about that anymore.
I'm happy that you brought up the technology part and Facebook and the scientists, they're always trying to perfect and create and so forth. But that's just it. When you invent something, there are flaws. It doesn't just come out like Facebook. If Facebook was always the way it was, they're always trying to perfect. You're getting feedback from individuals. And so he could have done the same thing. Okay, he's looking for a task. Okay, let me fix certain things. And then I need to do certain things. I need to maybe fix his face and put certain characteristics about him so people will, you know, just try to improve. But he wasn't trying to do that. And that's the same thing with technology. Or scientists, they're always trying to improve upon what they have created.
But that's why he's the ultimate romantic villain, because romanticism was there to combat the science that was taking on magic, mystery, and wonder from him. So saying that he's any of these other things sort of takes away from the background of where she came from.
So you're saying that he's fine the way he is?
Well, he has to be the way he is. If he nurtures and loves the monster, we don't have a story.
That would be a different type of story.
Right. And then we don't have that counterbalance too of, he's so set against the arts and thinking and nature, and he just creates because why should we stop if we can move forward? Why shouldn't we constantly move forward? And meanwhile, everyone who's kind of moral in this story is taking time to take stock in things and read and learn. And like early on, he says, I didn't read the laws because they weren't interesting to me.
Right.
But everyone around him has taken time to do that and to have that romantic balance of like the human matters instead of just the thing we can produce.
Something you said just a minute ago, Ray, like triggered something in my mind. Where, like, you're talking about like making adjustments and like fixing the monster, maybe a little plastic surgery, I don't know. But like,
But then my friend here said that what would it be?
Well,
you know,
I'm
that would be a
curious.
story.
If we're
It's a good point.
Yeah, no, right? It's funny. It's funny.
It's a real good point.
If we're thinking of the creature as a minority figure or as a refugee or orphan, like do they need to be fixed? Does the creature need to be fixed? Is it up to anyone to fix
Right.
the creature?
Yeah.
I'm curious.
That's a good point, because that's what we're always trying to do. People are always trying to assimilate into a
Yes.
culture.
Yeah.
And so, it's like we're always trying to fix them, or you have to change your name, or you have to change the way you speak, or you have to do this and do that. And so we're always trying to improve, but what is improvement? Accept me as I am. Accept, what would I be? Just accept me the way I am. And there was nothing wrong with me. Maybe there's something wrong with me. Maybe you should get to know me before you start trying to fix me.
And to that end, I mean, the creature painstakingly tries to fit in. He learns all of the things that he thinks he's supposed to learn. He tries to, get acquainted with the people that he should be, have, fellow feeling with, right? And it doesn't work. So, I mean, I think that goes to show all that changing doesn't help if we're gonna at base, you know, sort of reject on appearance or just like this self-preservationist feeling, right?
It makes me think of something I was thinking earlier when you brought up Latin American immigrants, and I was thinking about this discourse that goes around. It's like, oh, you should just learn the language and assimilate. You know, that's like what people say. If you did that, everything would be fine. But I think, I mean, what this is showing in relationship to that is even if you do learn the language, no one has to listen to you.
Yeah.
You know, it's really like it's up to the people in power to make that decision, rather than like changing whatever about yourself.
Which kind of makes it seem like no matter what the creature could do, after that initial rejection by his creator, he's hopeless. Like, I mean, there's nothing that he could do. Because I guess Victor would be the one holding the power in that dynamic. Yeah.
You know, I wonder if that's one reason this novel is so relatable 200 years later, is that most people have been in a situation where they feel that they've done everything they can think to do, you know, to make it work, to fit in, to whatever, and still there's just some judgment that you don't know where it's coming from. It's just, is it because you're a woman? Is it, what is it? You know, it's hard to say. Most people experience that, if not anywhere else in middle school. You know what I mean? Like, you have that feeling of just, you're not in the right body somehow. And so I just think it endures.
I think the theme that runs through this, an important theme, does have to do with looking, being able to see, versus being blind. And what does that really mean? When I'm looking, am I sighted or am I blind? What am I blind to? What am I really seeing? And I think, you know, the connection of really looking and intimacy involves really looking and looking beyond your own sort of prejudices and really seeing that other creature, that other being that's out there. And I sense that the tension in the book around sight and blindness, and I suspect that, you know, at least my fantasy is that it's the creature looking at Victor that is the scary thing. It's the connection. It's not some inanimate object. It's this living creature that is looking at you.
And when you say connection, do you mean like human to human almost?
Yeah, sort of bonding. Sort
Right.
of
Yeah.
sense of I thou.
Right. Yeah.
It's like an intimacy of like shared recognition that like I'm here and you're also here, right?
I wonder, do we want to open it up to just sort of general? I know we wanted to make room for all of the things that you also enjoyed that weren't necessarily tied to our theme for tonight. If anyone wants to bring any of that in, anything, just general comments about this volume.
So this is just something that I just thought of, but I don't know. I mean, I don't know if readings of this in this way have been done a lot, but like just thinking about like, I'm pretty sure Mary Shelley had already had kids by the time she wrote this, right?
She was pregnant while she was writing it, and then had her first baby in the process of writing it and revising it, and then that baby died maybe 21 days after it was born.
Okay. I was just thinking about that, like in relation to like, I mean, I've never had any kids, but like making life is like, that's terrifying. And I mean, I don't know, that's not really like a point, just.
No, it's it is totally a point, because what happens is you have a baby and they look back at you.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my God, I am responsible for this creature. How did that happen? Like yesterday I was footloose and fancy free, and now I'm responsible for another human being. You're totally on target.
It's overwhelming, that responsibility too, like, that this, like, thing is like in your hands, it's life.
And they let you take this thing home from the
Yeah.
hospital.
Yeah.
Of course they could,
Yeah, yeah.
But if you don't, it could chase you all through Europe with your
Kill everyone you love.
I see where you've been.
Well, thinking about like children and their responsibility that I mean, it's huge. I don't know what the figure is these days, but it's something like, is it $1 million or over $1 million it costs to raise a child, like from, baby to adult, like, but we do it, like, we're willing to do it. So what is it that makes us willing to like raise a child, but not be less willing, I guess, to like accept, someone else, someone other, someone different from us. Like, what is that? Because we're willing to care for someone, like most people who have children, and even those who don't. So what's the difference? I mean, is it flesh and blood? Is it that simple?
Pretty much.
Really?
I would say so. When it's yours, it's yours. This other person may have many differences than you do. Whether you're amenable to those differences or you're resistant to those differences, it's a big difference, sure. It is.
There's all that sort of odd, weird hormonal stuff that I don't understand.
Yeah, it's like attachment hormones.
I was just gonna say that the parallels to a parent with LGBT youth, and when it gets to the point where you're rejected from your family of origin, it's hard to imagine that somebody looks at a baby and like loves this baby, and then maybe 13 years later, 15 years later, you force yourself completely. Kids are kicked out of their homes, and then they try to find, like the preacher does, right? Tries to find a family, creates their own family because they no longer have a family of origin. So it's painful that the creature can't find and create that own family. Creating that family, sometimes can be dangerous too. For children, but just the parallels are so strong that how could he reject something that you created? But then at some point there's a difference and disconnect between your moral structure, from your child. Think how difficult that must be. To reject a child because you feel more strongly about your belief system, your value system than your own child's well-being.
That is so horrific. I mean, that is such a horrific thing to carry a child for 9 months, and because the child turns 13 and the child is telling the parents that I'm gay, and to just shut them off just like that and discard them. I mean, that is like, to me, personally, I feel that is so horrific because, again, sometimes I feel as if, and it has to do with religion, whereas they let religion rule the humanitarian aspect of who they are, because that's your child, and that's really tough.
I'm not even necessarily always. I think religion plays part of it, but also it's just such a difference. I think for some people, like even like culturally, that can cost someone to reject a child. I think it's an interesting approach into thinking about Frankenstein. I'm so glad you brought that up because it's almost like looking at rejection from another angle rather than this is someone I know at all, and I can reject this person. What kind of work goes into rejecting someone who you love? That's
I also think on the other side of it, of all the parents who are parents of severely special need children, and to see a mother come and be so excited that their child can hold a spoon, and kind of dedication and commitment and responsibility that those parents have to children who have severe needs. It's baffling to me, the way the human heart can embrace as well.
The potential is there.
And that's what the blind man is trying to say. He believes that, but can I come and live in your house,
So I wonder if we've opened up a sort of biological reading of Frankenstein that Victor rejects the creature because it's not his own flesh and blood, right? That he's responsible for, and he's created it from this other dead flesh. It's not, you know, his biological child. And maybe is that grounds for rejection in some of the comments that we've been making.
Yeah. Feels like there's a tension too between like the creation of pride or the creation of shame in this as well. Because he creates something and he's super proud of himself for figuring it out. And the second he sees it, he's like, no, this is shameful, this is wrong, I have to reject it. And the monster doesn't start to feel like he's a shameful being until so many people reject him.
Right.
And then he's like, well, I must feel I'm a Satan or on the wrong side of things. And so and there's so many chances for everyone to kind of be proud and be like, this monster's special, it's different, it's something unique, it's 8 feet tall, for heaven's sake. And for Victor to be like, hooray, I did a thing. And instead, he's like, oh, right away, so now it's gone. I can go hang out with Henry somewhere. And like, he's fine. And I'll never tell anyone about this, and hopefully no one will find out.
Well, I think, I forget what exactly you said, but it made me think of like the violence that the creature aligns himself with Satan, and then he starts to act out violently. So thinking about refugees in particular, I've been thinking about this a lot, obviously. But a lot of times we'll see like people who are displaced from their homes and like committing violent acts, and we sort of like trace onto them like, oh, that's just part of their nature, that's why we don't want them with us. But like, is there a way for us like through the creature to read like how can this like where does this violence come from? Is it part of their innate nature, or is it like something that's coming from their situation, their experiences? I don't know. What do you all think about that? Does that sound like a fully formed question? Yeah. Is that fear well founded? Is that violence just a part of who they are?
Or is it learned through experience? Yeah.
Our society,
Our society.
who they're associating with, or their environment.
Well, Bob asked a great question at the film. I can highlight that question, which is about, I guess, about the creature, but we were really talking at the Boris Karloff film. We were talking about, or you brought up the idea, like how does this relate to our system of incarceration and the way we treat prisoners. So if you want someone to join society again, why would you put them in solitary confinement, for example? I think was your specific example. I don't know if you want to say more about that in a friendlier crowd.
It seemed to me that after Victor creates the monster, Frankenstein, I hate to use the word monster, but so I'm going to try not to. If I do, forgive me. He's left alone in the castle in a room by himself for, of course it's the screenwriters, I'm going to say at least a minimum of 3 days, completely isolated. So now, in the discussion I've been thinking about several thoughts, and that is, does the creature perhaps envision Victor as his father? And so now, how would we as human beings feel rejected by our parents? And the creature feels completely rejected by Victor, his creator. So aren't our parents our creators also? And the monster takes off and leaves. And I'm going to jump ahead to the beginning of, almost the beginning of the conversation and go back to the ice. So, because that's where we started with the story. And Victor's chasing Frankenstein, and they're chasing each other back and forth. Is it possible Victor felt remorse for rejecting his creation? And Frankenstein felt a longing for wanting to have a relationship with his creator, i.e. father. And there was that, I hate to use the psychological word id, but longing for belonging to each other, or having a father, and I don't want to maybe even that's really extrapolating father and son relationship, but that's really a little too much for me, but does anybody else see anything there besides where I'm going with that?
I mean, I don't think it's too much.
I thought of that with kids who are in foster care, or kids who've been adopted, and that struggle of, I was abandoned by my family. And then a lot of times those kids end up, if they don't find somebody who takes them in and nurtures them and teaches them that they're going to be safe, they will act out. They will have issues because of the trauma of that. So I thought of that a lot.
Because he's completely rejected by Victor, and then the DeLacy's, and he has no family, no country. And we go to the rage and then the violence. It just seems, well, not that I can use human nature with Frankenstein, because, of course, Shelley imbued her own emotions on Frankenstein. I was struggling not to use the word monster.
It's so funny, like this just made me think of Elizabeth's adoption early in the book. And like who's worthy to be adopted and who isn't.
Yeah.
Because even when they describe her with all those other children and how she's somehow different and like she's beautiful and somehow shows that she's more noble. Like I remember that being like, really?
She had a German father, right?
Right,
She
she
had
had
a
a German
German
father. They could just spot she was a quality kid to adopt, like right off the bat. And that was so different from like when we were talking about taking the monster in and whether or not who would be able to take him in. Like, and a lot of it's based on sight with Elizabeth, like what you look like you be this angel in our house, and she becomes such an integrated part of the family, and she's so well adjusted. Versus this creature who clearly does not look like this angel, like, and it's just so interesting, like who gets a parent and who doesn't. Depends on.
Because I mean, I think something similar happens with Safety, because she runs away and she's taken in by the DeLacy. It's very beautiful. So I think it gets back to that, like who deserves a home, who gets to be welcomed into.
I'm curious too about the dynamic of age here, right? Like we're very willing to take in a child, very willing to take in little Elizabeth. The creature is in some ways a baby, right? He has this new life, but he's a really large baby. He's 8 feet tall. So, are we more willing to give of ourselves to someone who looks more helpless than this hulking, massive baby?
And that's the way we are when it comes to adoption. We want the babies, the ones that we could mold and create and whatever. But when it becomes a teenager or someone a little bit older, we don't want them because we feel that they're coming in with baggage. And so therefore we don't want the responsibility and the burden to having to, man, this child, he or she, parents were, alcoholic, there's, jail, abuse, there's so many baggages that so again, it's difficult. It's difficult sometimes for people to just want to have to deal with that. They prefer to deal with the simplicity of it all, as opposed to dealing with the big.
Well, think about, most recently, the crisis that we have, happening right now at the border, but children were being taken away from their families. And what motivates people more than the sight of a child who's been, taken away from its parents? Often, most of the websites I've been on lately for about information for refugees, we'll have a picture of a child, a young refugee, a young toddler, baby. That's what motivates people. And as we were talking, Maria, I was thinking back to what you were saying back to earlier about when the creature opens his eyes and Victor sees him, is like, oh no, this creature is gonna talk back to me. This creature is gonna, and teenagers, talk back.
I wonder if this can get back to the point that you made about LGBTQ youth, right? Who are rejected by their parents. When you're a child, you're moldable. You can your parents kind of fantasy that they can make you in their image, right? Like Victor really wants to make something in his image. But like once the creature's like old enough to look back and have this kind of like recognition of like a humanity or a shared bond, that's the point where Victor's just like, oh my god, I can't shape it to be what I want, right? It's just the way that like parents who reject their children feel, that like the child has now become of an age that like it's not who I am or who I wanted it to be, but like an individualized person that I can no longer control. Is this the issue here, that Victor feels like because the creature is somehow like autonomous, that he can't control it or like make it into himself?
Well, that's what I was gonna say with all parents. I mean, you think that you're going to have this perfect child, like you decide to have children, and then somehow you think it's gonna have all the best traits of both of you. And then it grows and develops and you say, wow, this is a bad trait behind that. I know. You know, I was thinking too, sometimes, we always want approval from our parents, but you get that moment where, oh my God, I sound like my dad right now, or you have that moment like I'm like my mom. But then in your kids too, when you see traits that you wish you didn't give them. I say, why? You want them to be different than you were. I say, like my son, you shouldn't procrastinate. I procrastinate. So I feel guilty that you transpose the certain negative trait you think are negative onto this child. And now they have to endure it.
Attention, please. The library will close in 10 minutes.
10 minutes? So we have to wrap it up, and this has been a great discussion. You can say a couple more things. I see good and evil in this book.
Yeah.
I see there is a balance. I see there is one extreme to the next. For example, a person that is gay versus a person who has special needs, because this person has special needs. You nurture them and you want to help them and so forth. But then someone who is gay is a different story. And again, there's always one extreme to the next. And I think, with life, that's the way it is, because there's always a balance. So again, there is good and evil, and everything is not always the way it is. And it's up to us to try. And sometimes things are off balance, and it's up to us to create a balance. That's what I say.
Did
Anyone else?
Other thoughts? I would just say, I think I'm kind of like an eternal optimist, so I think there's somehow, somewhere, in some alternate universe, a chance for the creature to be accepted and have his dignity and his humanity, because he is a human, recognized and be accepted. I think it could work. I think we have the power within us to do that.
I would add to Trisha's point that when we meet the creature, he's in Antarctica, so we can maybe imagine that he has created his own accepting society there.
Yeah. Oh, if I could say one more thing. I don't know if anyone's planning on coming to next week's, but I am doing, for my final paper for Beth's class, sort of a kind of contemplation on community writing. So if anybody has some alternate endings to this book that they would like to offer, even a sentence or two, like the creature joins the family somewhere, I don't know, anything that you can think of, some alternate ending, totally out there, bonkers, whatever. I would love it. Next week I'll be here and I'll have a little box here if you want to just drop it in. So that's all. I love it. Let's bring all your ideas.
Interesting.
Thank you all
Yes,
so much for coming. This was great.
This is a lot of fun.
If you are here from the BASD and you didn't get to sign in yet, I believe Rhea has the sheet for you to get your credits.
Yeah. And have some cookies and donuts.
Yeah.
So